I want you to picture this. It's a Tuesday morning in your building. You're walking the hall, coffee in hand, and you see a student. Maybe sitting on the floor outside a classroom, maybe just staring at the wall.
Or maybe they just screamed at a teacher and stormed out.
Exactly. And as a principal, your brain immediately goes to the handbook, right? What's the code? What's the consequence? Is this detention? Is this a suspension?
That's the reflex. It's that compliance and consequence model we were all trained in.
Right. But today, we're going to challenge that reflex. We're digging into a body of work that suggests when we reach for the discipline code in that moment, we might be making a fundamental diagnostic error.
We're punishing pain because we mistake it for disobedience.
That's it. We're talking about trauma, but not in that clinical send them to the counselor way. We're talking about trauma as a systemic issue that's sitting in your classrooms right now.
Huge distinction. And we're looking at insights from Clarence C. He's a strategist with Chacon Consulting, from a great conversation he had on the From Risk to Resilience podcast.
And what's so compelling, I think, is that he's not asking principals to become therapists.
No. He's just arguing that you can't actually run a successful school academically, behaviorally, you name it, if you don't understand the mechanics of how trauma works in the brain.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. If you're leading a school, you don't need more theory. You need a blueprint. So we're going to break down how to move from managing behavior to, understanding the signal.
And crucially, how to build a system that keeps your staff from burning out while they do it.
We have to start with the definition, though, because trauma has become a bit of a buzzword in education. We think of it as some big event, a car crash, a fire, something major.
Sure. And those things are absolutely traumatic. But Clarence White broadens it in a way that feels much more relevant to the daily grind.
How does he define it?
He defines it simply as anything that overwhelms your ability to cope. And I think that's so important. It's not about the event itself. It's about the nervous system's capacity to handle it.
So it could be violence, yes, but it could also be chronic instability, poverty, racism, just the cumulative weight of feeling unsafe day after day.
He uses this great analogy of the weight in the backpack. You have students walking in carrying all these invisible layers of stress. We don't see the rocks in the bag.
We just see them struggling to walk straight.
And that's where the friction happens. You see a student who is metaphorically struggling to walk straight, and you tell them to shape up. You're just criticizing their posture without ever addressing the weight.
Okay, so let's get practical. White talks about this idea of an audit, a behavior is communication audit. And it starts with shifting the fundamental question we ask.
The shift from, what is wrong with you?
To what happened to you?
It sounds subtle, but it changes everything. What's wrong with you looks for a defect in the child to punish. What happened to you looks for a context, for a root cause.
Let's break down some of the profiles he mentions, because I think every administrator is going to recognize these students. First, the student with their head down on the desk, hood up, totally unresponsive.
The classic disengaged or lazy student. In a traditional audit, that's defiance. But through a trauma lens, that's a freeze response.
Meaning?
That student isn't lazy, they are exhausted. Their nervous system might have been on high alert all night, scanning for danger. They aren't checking out to be rude, their body is checking out to survive. They're depleted.
Then you've got the opposite, the explosive student, the one who really disrupts things. You ask for a minor correction, like take off a hat, and they just blow up.
It feels wildly disproportionate.
To you, yes.
Right, to you, because you know you're not a threat. But for a student with a trauma history, any authority figure can equal danger. So when you step in with a correction, you aren't just a principal asking for a shirt tuck, you're a potential threat. That explosion is a fight response. It's a defense mechanism.
That is a very hard pivot for a lot of leaders. We're conditioned to see that as pure disrespect.
It feels personal, but so often it's biological.
And the third one, which I found really interesting, the class clown.
The funny kid. We usually just think they want attention.
And they do, but he says it's a specific kind of attention. It's deflection. It's a shield. If I can make everyone laugh, I don't have to be vulnerable. I control the room with humor so I can't get hurt.
It's actually a pretty sophisticated way of keeping people at a distance.
Clarence shares a case study that really brings this all home. This student labeled oppositional.
Right. Total troublemaker. The school was throwing the book at him, suspensions, isolation, just treating the behavior as the problem.
But then they finally asked the question, what happened to you?
And they found out the child had witnessed the parent being arrested.
Which is a massive trauma.
It completely shattered his sense of safety. And think about it. Who arrested the parent? authority figures in uniforms. So when he comes to school and another authority figure tries to discipline him, he's reliving that trauma. The school was accidentally reinforcing the exact dynamic that hurt him.
So the intervention wasn't more detention.
No, the intervention was safety. They stopped punishing the pain and started offering stability and predictability. Once that student realized the school wasn't another threat, the opposition it evaporated.
This brings us to a really difficult reality, though. You can have all these amazing insights, but you can't implement them if your staff is drowning.
That's the valid fear, and this is where we have to talk about secondary trauma or compassion fatigue.
Is that just a fancy word for burnout?
It's deeper. Burnout is, I have too much to do. Secondary trauma is, I am absorbing the emotional weight of my students' pain. It's the cost of caring.
And Clarence warns that if educators are just soaking this up all day with no release valve, they eventually shut down. They have to.
Absolutely. That whole quiet quitting phenomenon, it's not always laziness. It can be a trauma response from the adult, a survival strategy. I have to detach or I will break.
He's very clear on this point. If the adults aren't well, the kids won't be either.
You cannot have a trauma-informed school with a traumatized staff. It's impossible.
So let's get into the how. This is the blueprint part. If I'm a principal, how do I build a system for this? The first pillar, white outlines, is routine as safety.
This sounds so basic, but it's foundational. Trauma creates a chaotic internal world for a student. The school must provide a predictable external world.
So routines have to be sacred.
Absolutely. If a student knows exactly what happens at 9:00 a.m. every single day, their cortisol levels can actually drop. They don't have to waste energy scanning for threats.
Okay, the second pillar, mandated relationship time. I want to linger on that word, mandated. We always tell teachers build relationships, but we treat it like an extra credit project.
Right. It's something they're supposed to squeeze in during lunch. White argues you have to operationalize connection. It has to be in the master schedule, protected time.
He mentions the 2x10 strategy. Can you unpack what that actually looks like on a Tuesday?
Sure. The 2x10 is very specific. You find a student who's struggling or disconnected. For 10 consecutive school days, you spend 2 minutes a day talking to them.
Okay.
But here's the key. You can talk about anything except school. No grades, no behavior, no homework. Just them, their favorite video game, their dog, anything.
It breaks that cycle of only interacting with them when there's a problem.
Exactly. It proves you see them as a human, not just a problem to be solved. But from a policy standpoint, a principal has to create that time, whether it's an advisory period or a morning meeting block, where that is the only goal.
Okay, pillar 3. This is a big one. Restorative over punitive.
The culture shift.
Let's go back to that explosive kid who flips the desk. In a traditional model, they get suspended.
Which removes them from the community and confirms their belief that they're bad.
So what's the restorative protocol look like in that moment?
Well, the immediate goal is always safety. But once the student is regulated, the process isn't about punishment. It's a guided conversation. What happened? Who was harmed by what you did? And what do we need to do to make it right?
So they have to take accountability, but it keeps them in the community.
It repairs the relationship rather than severing it. If that student flips a desk and then has to help the janitor fix it and apologize to the class, they're learning cause and effect. Suspension just teaches them avoidance.
Pillar 4 is universal training. This is where it gets really messy, logistically. Weiss says everyone needs to be trained. The bus drivers, the cafeteria staff, the secretaries. How does a principal even do that?
Yeah, it is a massive hurdle, but it's non-negotiable. The bus driver is the first and last adult the student sees. If that interaction is aggressive, the kid arrives at school already in fight mode.
So this is something you have to advocate for at the district level. Build it into contracts.
Yes. Pay support staff for that extra training day. Because if your front office staff blows up at a parent who is already stressed, your entire trauma-informed mission is compromised at the front door.
It has to be a whole building language.
Exactly. And woven through all of this, and we have to highlight this, is cultural safety.
Yes. Let's spend a minute here, because often cultural safety is like a diversity assembly in February, but Clarence puts it at the center of the model.
It's critical.
Right.
If we're talking about safety, we have to acknowledge that for many students, their very identity has been treated as a threat. If a student has to code switch, change how they talk, their hair, their culture, just to avoid being corrected all day,
That is a state of chronic stress.
you're inflicting trauma. A trauma-informed audit has to look at the handbook and ask, are we policing culture under the guise of policing behavior?
Like dress codes that target specific hair textures or styles.
Precisely. You can't have psychological safety without cultural safety. Full stop.
That is a heavy audit. It requires a lot of looking in the mirror. Let's pivot back to the staff, the oxygen mask principle. How do I, as a principal, actually operationalize staff wellness beyond, putting bagels in the break room?
No more bagels as a policy, please. Clarence talks about staff wellness check-ins as a structural, non-negotiable policy.
What does that mean?
It means the leadership team schedules regular, maybe 15-minute one-on-ones with every staff member. And the agenda is strictly about their emotional bandwidth.
So not an evaluation.
Strictly non-evaluative. The question is simply, how are you holding up? It gives a teacher permission to say, I'm really struggling with this class, without fearing it's going to end up on their performance review.
It's a safety check for the adults.
It's the oxygen mask check.
Yeah.
If you don't check the levels, you won't know who's about to pass out until they quit in March.
Okay, let's talk about the pushback. Because if I go to my school board or my parent community and say, we're doing restorative justice and wellness check-ins, a lot of them are going to hear, we're going soft on discipline.
That's the #1 criticism. You're letting kids get away with everything.
So what's the communication strategy there?
You have to frame it in the language of outcomes. You sell it as effectiveness, not niceness. You say, look, traditional punishment isn't working. We have the data. Suspension rates are high, but the behavior isn't changing. This new model is about building skills and accountability that actually sticks.
And for the board,
Yeah.
they want numbers, KPIs.
You give them metrics. So in year 1, what are you tracking? Quantitatively, you track office referrals, not just the number, but the type. Are you seeing fewer explosions? Track suspension rates. And crucially, track staff retention and absenteeism. If your teachers are showing up more, something is working.
And what about qualitative data?
You audit the noise in the building. Just walk the hallways for an hour. What's the ratio of correction to connection? Are you hearing, don't do that, tuck your shirt in, stop running? Or are you hearing, good morning, how was your weekend, glad you're here?
You're listening for the tone of the building.
You're auditing for visibility. Are those kids with their heads down still invisible? Or are adults actively trying to connect with them? It all goes back to that quote, you can't reach kids you don't see.
I want to give our listeners that Monday morning move, the one concrete step they can take. Clarence offers up a question that is so simple, but it takes real guts to ask it.
It really does. The move is this. Next week, in your staff meeting or in those one-on-ones, ask your team, what do you need to feel safe here?
Not what supplies do you need, not how's the curriculum pacing.
What do you need to feel safe?
Why is that question so terrifying for a leader to ask?
Because you might not like the answer. They might tell you they don't feel safe because of one of your policies, or because they're overworked and unsupported.
So the formula can't just be ask.
No, the formula is ask, then listen, then act. If you ask that question and do nothing, you have done more damage than if you never ask at all. You've just proven their safety doesn't actually matter.
So if they say, I never get a break from duty, you have to be willing to at least look at the schedule.
You have to try to move the needle. Even a small action shows you heard them, and it builds trust.
And just to tie a bow on this, why should a principal take this on? It's a huge undertaking.
Because you cannot raise test scores in a building where everyone's cortisol is through the roof. When a brain is in survival mode, student or teacher, the prefrontal cortex, the learning part of the brain, basically goes offline.
So this isn't just about feelings. It's about cognitive capacity.
It is the absolute foundation for learning.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to chew on. If we really accept this core idea that disruption is actually distress, how does that change our entire definition of what it means to be a successful school leader?
It changes the job description completely. You're no longer the chief enforcer. You become the chief interpreter. Your primary job is to see the weight in the backpack.
Seeing the weight in the backpack, that's the work. A huge thank you to the source material from Clarence C. and the From Risk to Resilience podcast for laying out this roadmap.
It's vital work. It's hard, but it's vital.
Take the blueprint. Maybe ask that safety question next week. And start building a school that sees the human first. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive.